Terraria has single-handedly ensured I'll always own a second monitor. It's gotta be the most detailed $10 game I've ever played. Relogic is putting out their 6th final update next year. They can't stop adding content to the thing. And for the price of 2 Big Macs, you too can spend hundreds of hours exploring the labors of these passionate, dedicated developers. But I guarantee you'll never come close to knowing all the game's nooks and crannies without help. I've logged almost 700 hours on Terraria and I'm still finding new things, largely thanks to the wiki. The wiki gives you all the info you could ever need. Crafting recipes, item locations, drop rates, builds, bosses, everything. But there's one crafting station in Terraria that's a real pain to get info on: the Tinkerer's Workshop. The Tinkerer's Workshop allows you to combine items together, stacking the abilities of 2 items into one. And for a lot of recipes, you can then use that crafted item to make an even better item. It's a pretty pivotal part of getting beefier in the game, but the recipes get so complicated. Some recipes, like the shell phone, have over 20 items involved in crafting it. Other items have multiple ways you can craft it. Some items are involved in 8 different recipes. You get the picture. You can find all the recipes and their ingredients on the Tinkerer's Workshop wiki, but it's difficult to navigate. It's in a table format where you have to scroll through the thing for a while before you ever hit the bottom, which is a lot more annoying than it sounds. On top of that, the only info that you get from the page are the ingredients and the recipes. It doesn't tell you anything about the items themselves. Over the years, members of the community have created visuals to show crafting recipes for the Tinkerer's Workshop. There's usually some sort of color coding to help identify hard mode versus pre-hard mode items, if an item is the final crafting option, that sort of thing. They're a huge help, but they're not perfect. Like, if you need to search for a specific item, you still gotta seek it out in the picture. Or if you don't know where to find the item in the game, you'll have to look it up on the wiki anyways. I always wish there was one place to find everything you need for using this crafting station. So I decided to make it. My goals for this project were that there should be an easy way to find items, like with the search bar. You should be able to see an item's recipe in both directions, so how to make the item and what the item can be used to craft. And the location information for items that can be found in the overworld should be viewable in some way. I also really wanted the GUI to have the Terraria-like feel, with stuff like Andy font, the background menu blue, and rounded corners. I wanted it to be consistent. After a bit of research, I decided to use Python, Tkinter, and SQLite 3. If you've ever used Tkinter, you might be asking, why? Tkinter is a useful toolkit, but barely at all customizable. Well, I use front-end languages on the regular already, and I really wanted to challenge myself. Python's been on the back burner for me for a while now, and Tkinter was the recommended toolkit for Python GUIs, so it was a natural choice. Plus, I'd never used it before, so I had no idea what to expect out of it. For the layout of this project, I had envisioned a searchable icon panel on the left, and the rest of the screen would be the recipe tree. Somewhere on the right side too, I imagined there would be some sort of info panel with details about the item that you clicked. For storing item data, I decided I would have several tables that hold item information, like the main one for the items themselves, then one for locations, one for recipes, and so on. But to start off, I only created the items table and the locations table. I wanted to iron out all the kinks with how the table should be structured before I went through all the effort of making them and then just have to change it. So I created those 2 tables and added 3 items at random. Once all that was done, I got to the great Herculean task of this project: make Tkinter pretty. I copied some code to get me started with an initial GUI. My first order of business was the icon panel on the left, so I made each item into button elements since I wanted them selectable. They were butt ugly. I fixed this a little bit by adjusting the width and height of all the buttons, but it still felt vintage. Around this time, I discovered the TTK module for Tkinter, which is an import for easily making elements look not bad. And it definitely made it look not bad. Not exactly what I was looking for, but I can make it perfect later. But then I had the same sizing issue again. The TTK elements handled sizing differently than Tkinter base elements, and my program was complaining at me for trying to fix it because of how I had styled the frame that contained the buttons. I was getting fed up with buttons, so I just reverted back to my correctly sized icons and moved on for now. Part of the styling that I wanted was for one of the Terraria backdrops to be the background of the GUI. Adding a picture to the GUI was simple enough, but with full opacity for the icon and recipe frames, you wouldn't even be able to see it. So now I needed to make the frames semi-transparent. This isn't natively supported. I went down a rabbit hole of trying to make this work, and it wasn't happening. Okay, so just the borders of the background image. I'll fix it later and we'll just have to live for now. I changed the background color of my icon frame just to know that I could, and then I added a bunch more items to my database. I decided to look at adding search bar filtering, so I added item names to the icons. I wrote a search bar filtering function that doesn't work. I apparently needed a function to get the scroll bar to work when you resize the GUI. Okay, the scroll bar doesn't even work. Oh. I used JavaScript for this project, and here's my progress after 2 hours. Her name is Tinkery. After those first 2 hours, I had a general idea of the structure for Tinkery. Each Tinkerer's Workshop item would be a JavaScript object in an object array called items. Then there would be another object array called recipes. Each recipe name would be the name of an item that can be crafted, and the ingredients for the recipe would be the items needed to craft it. Some items might have an array of recipes if there's multiple ways to craft it. So with this structure in mind, the icon panel can be generated by looping through the items object array and creating an icon for each item, and that should happen when you open Tinkery. Then the recipes would be generated by looking at the recipe for an item, and that would happen when you click an icon. So I needed to create an object for every item used or created at the Tinkerer's Workshop. And yeah, I did this by hand. I had no idea how to dodge this. ChatGPT denied me. So I copied and pasted my template, working my way down the recipe list and the Tinkerer's Workshop wiki. It took several hours, but I finally got it all done. I also added a tag property for each object, and that's used to filter items by category. So if you only wanted to see the items from ability, for instance, you'd click that filter button and that's all you'd see. There were some recipes, like the weighted pressure plate, for instance, that required raw resources to craft, so I made another separate object array just for raw items, to keep it all tidy. Once all the data was defined right and put in the right arrays, I went ahead and styled the rest of the page, and this was by far the most satisfying part of the project. I got so sucked in. I added styling for the icons, a key to define the styling, an info panel on the right to tell you about the item that you clicked, made the search bar work, and added the title and a very important footer. And now for the most important part, the recipes. I use data-driven documents, or D3.js. D3 is a JavaScript library for producing dynamic, interactive data visualizations in web browsers. That's what it says on Google anyways. More officially, D3 makes your data cool. In the D3 toolbox is 30 discrete libraries to choose from. I use the D3 hierarchy tree, which produces node link diagrams of trees. Perfect for the recipes. To format the data for D3, I had a recursive function that checked the ingredients for each item in the recipes array. If the item didn't have ingredients, then the function stopped. This worked perfectly, but I ran into an issue with recipes that had multiple crafting options. As it was only grabbing one of the recipes. So to work around this, I added the class optional recipe to all the recipes if there was more than one, and then used an invisible node to connect all of them to the tree. Later, I added a tilde circle on the tree to more explicitly show that it's just one way of crafting the item. And then I had a pretty little crafting tree! But I had one more thing to do. My goal for this project was to have a crafting tree go in both directions. I had all the ingredients for an item, but I still didn't have a display for all the items it could be made into. I looked into how to do this with D3, and then I learned that D3 hierarchy trees can only have complexity in one direction. Basically, it can't branch downward and upward at the same time. To be completely honest, I thought about just calling it here because I was so excited with what I had made so far. I'm glossing over it, but formatting the ingredient data was a real jerk to do. And I just want to share this thing. But more than that, I wanted Tinkery to be complete. So I brainstormed on it for a while and got my solution. 2 trees. Every item you click has the ingredient tree that extends downward, and then a potential craft tree that extends upward, with the root nodes perfectly overlapping. It worked like a charm. Tinkery is a comprehensive GUI for the Tinkerer's Workshop. On the left is an icon panel containing every item used at the Tinkerer's Workshop. You can real-time search for items using the search bar, or you can filter items by their tags. A regular blue background on the icon means the item is a pre-hard mode item, and a shiny blue background means it's a pre-hard mode item that's the final object in the crafting tree. A red background is hard mode, and a shiny red background is a hard mode final object in the crafting tree. You might see some items with a brown background in the recipe tree. These are raw items that are used in crafting, but aren't equipable items themselves. When you click an item in the icon panel, it will generate an ingredient tree and a potential craft tree. The ingredient tree contains every item needed to craft up to the item that you selected. The potential craft tree shows every item the selected item can be used to create. The info panel on the right will populate with the name, icon, tooltip, value, tags, and location, if available, of the item that you clicked. If a recipe has multiple crafting variations, that's indicated with the tilde circle. In the recipe tree, you can click item icons to view their info in the info panel. But if you still need more info, you can click the icon in the info panel to automatically open a new tab routing to the wiki for that item. If you found a parent recipe that you want to craft, check Toggle Tree Traversal to navigate up the tree. Now when you click an item icon in the tree, it will open the recipe tree for that item. Uncheck Toggle Tree Traversal to turn this off. You can pan and zoom on the recipe tree as needed. Tinkery is open source. I personally play vanilla Terraria, which is why I didn't add mod support for really popular mods like Calamity, for instance. But if someone wants to, for Calamity or anything else, I've included a link to the repo in the description. If you're wanting to add to Tinkery, please keep mod items together at the bottom of the items array, just so that it's properly sorted in the icon panel. Also, include the mod name as a tag for each item so it can be filterable. The filter options aren't hard-coded, it's all the distinct tag values, so just adding the name is all you need. Also, please keep the footer text as is. You owe me $1 for every tab I helped you close. Just kidding. But I do hope you enjoy and like Tinkery. I had a great time when I was making it, and I've already used it in my Terraria gameplay. And it's exactly what I've been wanting for a while, so I hope it satisfies somebody else too. If you want to support my channel, feel free to do the things. And if you hate Tinkery, be sure to leave a comment saying you'd rather use a wiki.